Okay, welcome everybody. We're on the bottom of Dalit Amud Beis and top line on the screen. The Mishnah said that if the schach is not 10 tefachim high, which also includes the machitas, you have to have the wall should be 10 tefachim high and the schach should be 10 tefachim high. If not, then it's possible. So Manolan, how do you know what's the source for that? So that's going to be the whole Gemara today is going to be on this subject. That's today's subject. Itma, we learned Rav, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chaviva Masnu. These four Amorim, Rav, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Chaviva said the following. But before the Gemara continues what they said, really, they continue talking from the word Oron over here. But before we continue, there's a parenthesis that says, Whenever you have in Seder Moed this set of people, Rav, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Chaviva, some have a different gears. Instead of Rabbi Yochanan, they have Rabbi Yonasan. They take out Rabbi Yochanan, they put Rabbi Yonasan instead. So these four people said the following, and question if it's Rabbi Yochanan or Rabbi Yonasan. A point of interest that in Nehemiah, when it has a list of the Kohanim Gedolim over there, and then the Sefer Nehemiah, it has the same list. One time it says one of the Kohanim Gedolim's name is Yochanan, then later on when it says it again, it says Yonasan. So it's interesting that there's something connected with Hanan and Hassan that the Chor means, probably is referring to Hashem, like Yehochanan, Yehonasan, and Hanan, Hassan, some similarity between gracing and giving. So just an interesting point that in the Amorim, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yonasan.
Same way as Chesed.
Right, the Hanan and the Hassan, yeah. Hanan. And just interesting that they find the same, not the same changeover in the Navi also, not only in the Gemara. It must be some connection, I don't know. Anyway, what did they say? They said the following. Oron Tisha v'Kaporos Tefach. The Oron in the base of Mikdash, the Oron was 9 tefachim high, and the Kaporos on top of it was 1 tefach. Altogether is 10. Arekan Asara. So when you put the Kaporos onto the Oron, the full height was 10 tefachim. So what? It says that Hashem said, "I'm going to meet over there. I'm going to speak to you from on top of the Kaporos." It means the Shekhinah came onto the Kaporos. What do you have so far? That the Shekhinah came on top of the Kaporos, which was 10 tefachim high. What do we do with that? So we continue. Tanya, even though it seems sometimes that the Shekhinah came down to this world, and probably it's referring to the cloud which represents the Shekhinah. Sometimes I see in the Mishkan that the cloud is a created thing. It's not Hashem, but it's a cloud which represents the presence of Hashem. It never came down. And the Moshe and Eliyahu, even though it seems to say that they went up to heaven, but they didn't. They never went to a place which is called heaven. Shenama, Hashemayim, Shemayim, Hashem, Baruch Nasam B'nei Adam. So man never went to Shemayim, and Hashem, the Shekhinah, never came down to Oretz. And that's going to really that's the end of the answer. The rest of the Gemara now is going to be challenging or asking for the sources of these. Yeah, we're talking about not that Hashem's essence is here, and also not the cloud. We're talking about the cloud, the cloud which represents Hashem's presence. So that Hashem sees everything, Hashem created everything, that goes without saying. But the presence of Hashem, which would the Shekhinah, which here probably means the cloud, like it says by the Mishkan, that the cloud came down, the cloud was on top of the Kaporos. So that cloud, which is a created thing, which represents the presence of, so that did not come down to the earth.
Hashem wasn't in the base of the Mishkan.
The Gemara is going to ask a kasha. The Gemara is going to say, what does it mean? The Gemara is going to say that only the bottom 10 tefachim is called the Aretz. So that's the answer. That's what the Gemara is going to work on now. But as far as what the Gemara wants, the Gemara is happy at this point. The Gemara is going to say soon that it means 10 tefachim. That's understood now also, that 10 tefachim. So that's already the end of the answer. The question was, how do you know that the sukkah has to be 10 tefachim high? The mechitza is the schach, because of what we just said. That it says that the Shekhinah never came down. But the Shekhinah did come down to 10 tefachim. Once you know that the only the Kaporos together is 10 tefachim, so the Shekhinah did come down on top of the Kaporos, and it never came down to the place called Oretz. That means that that's the place, that's the dividing line where it's called Oretz. After that, it's not called Oretz anymore. The Mechitza has to divide the whole atmosphere called Oretz. We had a little similar what we had in Masechet Shabbos, that a Mok 10 Tefachim was called a Mokum P'tor. It's not called the Oretz anymore. So the Mechitza has to divide the whole area called Oretz. That's 10 Tefachim high. And the Schach also has to be Schach on the Oretz. So it has to be above 10 tefachim. The Gemara is going to talk about Shemayim also. I think that the Gemara doesn't mean to say that Shemayim is above 10 tefachim. It isn't that 10 tefachim is the dividing line between the Shemayim and the Aretz. The Aretz is the bottom 10 tefachim. Shemayim, of course, is the heavens, and it means someplace up high. And it's going to say that also there's a 10 tefachim margin or atmosphere below the Shemayim that is also batel to the Shemayim. What I said.
Rabbi Rashi does say hefsek reshusa.
Yes, good, very good. The Gemara continues. What I just said now is the Askal brings down from the Chassam Sofer and other Achronim that say that there's the Oretz and it's 10 tefachim, and there's the Shemayim and it's 10 tefachim, and in between call it a neutral land. There's a lot of neutral between the Shemayim and the Oretz. The Oretz is the ground and the Shemayim is the heavens. In between is a lot of space. The 10 tefachim of each is batel to its area, to its zone. And that's the answer to the kasha. It means as far as the Gemara is going to go off to challenge each point as kasha is sent, but the answer to the question is already established, that if the Shekhinah came down to the top of the Kaparos, which was 10 tefachim, and we see that the Shekhinah never came down to the Oretz, that means that the Oretz does not go above 10 tefachim. Only 10 tefachim is called Oretz. And you have to divide the whole Oretz, so Mechitza has to divide the Oretz, and the Schach has to be on the Oretz. The Gemara is cautious now. First of all, the Shekhinah never came down. It says the Shekhinah came down. The Shekhinah came to Har Sinai, and that means the cloud, the Anan, like Shekhinah. The answer is no. The Malam Yasat Tefachim. It was hovering above. It didn't come down within 10 tefachim of the ground of Har Sinai. Another in the future, the Hashem's feet. Of course, it doesn't mean anything literal about the feet, but it means that the Shekhinah, the cloud of glory, is going to come down onto Har Hazeisim. So again, it says it does come down onto the mountain. No, the Malam Yasat Tefachim. Again, it's going to be hovering above 10 tefachim. The Akasha, the opposite way. Moshe never and Eliyahu never went up to on high. Below the Moshe Eliyahu and Moram, but Ksiv and Moshe Elohim. Now the pasuk in the pasuk is that Moshe went up to Har Sinai because the Shekhinah was there and Moshe came up to Har Sinai. But the Gemara is taking it, at least in the literal words, the Gemara is taking it that Moshe went up to heaven, and so it says Moshe went up to heaven. No, the Matam Yasor. He didn't go into the area of 10 tefachim within Shemayim. There's a place on Shemayim that's called high up in heavens, and Moshe didn't go into the heaven. He only went lower than 10 tefachim of the heavens. Well,
and that's also when he went up 40 days.
Yeah. The Pashup Shad, the Pashup Shad, I think shouldn't be confused. The Pashup Shad is Moshe went up always to Har Sinai. Never did he go off Har Sinai. And going up to Hashem because the Shekhinah came to Har Sinai, so Moshe went up to Hashem on Har Sinai. But the Gemara is taking it that he went up to heaven, and the Kash he said, where Yoshi said he never went up to heaven. He went within 10 tefachim of the heavens. But Eliyahu says, Vaksiv, that Eliyahu went up with a storm to heaven. That's how he left the world, and he went up to heaven. But no, he never went to heaven. He didn't go into the 10 tefachim area of heaven. The Matam Yasara. Vaksiv, back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Vaksiv, Ma'achaz Pnei Kisei says, Alav Anano. That's a pasuk which is an Eov describing about Moshe going up, in the Drash at least, that Moshe going up to Har Sinai, with the Shemayim, and it says that holding on to the Kisei HaKavod, and Hashem spread out upon him and his cloud. So this word Pirshes is not a regular word, and the Gemara says, Pirei Shakai Miziv. The word, the sign is going to be the Ziv, that Hashem spread all over him the Ziv of the Shekhinah, and he made the cloud on top of him. But anyway, it sounds like Moshe Rabbeinu was holding on to the cloud and to the Kisei. Oh, that's next kasha right away, but it sounds like he's already in heaven. The Gemara understands that this is in heaven. The answer is Lamatam Yasara. No, not in the heaven, lower than 10 tefachim from the heavens. But it says he held on to the Kisei, and that the Gemara understands Pasha that the Kisei is in the heaven. So if he's holding on to the Kisei, he's in heaven. No, that the Kisei, it stretched. The Kisei was in heaven, but it lowered. I think it means that like it stretched to lower than 10 tefachim. Over there he held on to it, but he didn't go into heaven. So the Gemara is happy with the first point. Everything seems to be good. That the Shekhinah never came down to the Oretz, but it did come down to on top of the Kaporos, which is 10 tefachim. So that's a proof that the atmosphere of the Oretz goes until 10 tefachim.
Because when you learn in yeshiva, you always think that Moshe is the Shemayim.
I think not. In the Pashup Shatni, I think in the Cheder, they should teach that Moshe went up to Har Sinai, the Pashup Shat. There's no reason to talk about going to heaven. I think the Gemara here is saying something about that going into heaven, and even that the Gemara is saying, but only within 10 tefachim of the heaven. But I think in the Pashup Shat in the Chumash, there's no reason to learn that. The Pashup Shat means that Moshe went up to Har Sinai. The Shekhinah that says that the Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, there was the Anan, there was Kolos Brakim, Be'esh Alahor. That
We learned for 40 days he was not on Har Sinai. He was up in Shemayim.
I think it says also he was on Har Sinai.
The angels up there, and he's holding on to
Rebbe,
Doesn't
you
Har
just
Sinai-
said yourself that in the pasuk it says Vayered Hashem, and not only that, but what's the pashtus of mitzvahs Hagbala? It also supports what you're saying. The Yidden weren't allowed to go up on the mountain.
It says, the Gemara says that. The Gemara says Hashem came to Har Sinai, but he was hovering above 10 Tvachim off the Har Sinai. That's not difficult. That's okay. That doesn't change anything in the Pshat. That Hashem, the Shekhinah, came down to Har Sinai, but not all the way touching the mountain, 10 Tvachim above the mountain. That's okay. That doesn't change the Pshat so much. But what people think that Moshe went up to heaven, I think the Pashup Pshat, you don't say that. Our Gemara is saying that he went up to heaven, even that, within 10 Tvachim of the heaven. But in the Pashup Pshat, the Pasuk, Moshe went up to Har Sinai, and he didn't go up to heaven. Okay, the Gemara continued. Vayhi Moshe Bahor. It says openly. Vayhi Moshe Bahor. Moshe was in the mountain. So I think that all the kids in the Cheder they should learn that he was on the mountain. Okay, the Gemara is happy so far that the drasha is from the fact that the Shekhinah came down to Har Sinai. The Shekhinah came on the Kaporos, and it was 10 Tvachim high. So you see that the Oretz, the atmosphere of the Oretz is called 10 Tvachim, and therefore the Mechitza has to divide the whole Oretz, and the Schach has to be hovering over the Oretz. The Gemara is a kasha. The Gemara is going to go into the details now. He also took as a given that the Aaron was a 9 and the Kaporos was 1. That's how we got to 10. How did we get to the fact that the Kaporos was 10 Tvachim high? Because the Aaron Tisha, but Kaporos Tefach. Altogether is 10. But who says? Bishlam. So the Gemara says Bishlam Aaron Tisha. That's good. The fact that the Aaron is 9 is, that's a good. That's all fine and well. It says the mentions of the Aaron should be 2.5 amos long, 1.5 amos wide, 1.5 amos high. We're interested in the height. And the Gemara is assuming is 6 Tvachim. So an 1.5 is going to be 9 Tvachim. The Gemara is going to discuss this later on. Not so simple, but at this point the Gemara is assuming that an Amma is 6 Tvachim, and therefore Amma v'chetzi is 9.5. Is 9. 6 and 3. So that's good. But how do you know the kaparos is a tefach? And the kaparos tefach minolam. The pasuk doesn't say how big the kaparos is. So who says the kaparos is a tefach tall? The Tanya Rabbi Chanina. The answer is Rabbi Chanina says, "Kol hakelim shas Moshe nasna ben Torah bidas orkon bidas rachon bidas kamosan." All the kelim that Moshe made, the Torah says all the dimensions: the length, the width, and the height. But kaparos midas orkon midas rachon nasna. The kaporos, the Torah only says the dimensions of the length and the width, 2.5 by 1.5, but same as the Aaron. But it doesn't say how tall is the kaporos. So what is it? What is the height of the kaporos? We said it's a tefach. How do you know? So the Gemara says, "Say Ramad, go learn from the minimum the size of a kli, which was the smallest kli in the Mishkan, and whatever's going to be the smallest one, we're going to learn from there that's the same size as the kaporos. Again, the kaporos is the cover over the Aaron. How do you know how tall it is? So the Gemara is going to learn out from the other kelim of the Mishkan, whichever one was the smallest one. Shenema v'asishalom is geras tofach. So big. That's a pasuk by the Shulchan. The table had a rim around it, and it says tofach. Tofach is a tefach. Maybe we won't even call it a tefach. We should call it a tofach. But a tefach, what we call a tefach, it says that the misgeras is like a rim, a frame that was around the table, and that was a tefach tall. So you see that that's the smallest kli we find. We find other ones that were amos and things like that, but the smallest kli is the misgeres, the rim around the shulchan, and therefore it's a tefach. So here too you learn out that kaporos was a tefach. Ma'alol tefach, afkan tefach. Just like over there was a tefach. So too the kaporos was a tefach. The Marsakasha, why learn out from the smallest? The Neilot to Kalim Gufa. You learn out from the Kalim themselves, which were bigger than that. The answer is. Okay, we'll get it soon. Tafasta meruba lo tafasta. Drop smaller. Tafasta meruba lo tafasta. Tafasta more tafasta. The word it's with a sin. It's samach sin. It means to grab. If you grab a lot, you don't grab. If you grab a little, I think it's in English. You'd say that like 1 in the bag is better than 2 in the bush. It means you have to say whatever is definite. So when the Torah says something, you can't take the big share. You have to take the minimum. But that the Torah means assume the minimum. Don't assume the maximum. So we have to go to the smallest kli. So there are kelim that are bigger, but we'll talk about the smallest one. Thank you very much. We have to talk about the smallest one. So the smallest one find is a tefach. The Gemara says it's not true. You find smaller. The Nebuchadnezzar tzitz, the tzitz, which was the head plate of the Kohen Gadol, was smaller than a tefach. The Tanya tzitz it doesn't say in the pasuk, but we have a Halacha Moshe Messinai. Tzitz dama k'mentan shel zav. The tzitz is like a plate of gold. Its width was 2 etzbos. 2 etzbos is half tefach. A tefach is 4 etzbos. So its width was two finger breadths. Mukaf me'oz on those, and it goes from ear to ear. Means it would be on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol from ear to ear. And how wide would it be? 2 etzbos. So like Mark, that's enough our information. We just want to know that it's based etzbos. But once you put the price, we'll say more information about the tzitz. Kasav Allah Beishitin. It was written on 2 lines. Yud K Milamala, the Kodesh Lamed Milamata. The pasuk says you should write on Kodesh LaHashem. Really, Yud K means Yud K Vav K. The pasuk says you should write Kodesh Yud K Vav K. Kodesh LaHashem. But here the Gemara says that it was written on 2 lines. It wasn't written on the same line. It was written on 2 lines, and Hashem's name was written higher. Yud K Milamala, Yud K Vav K higher up, and Kodesh Lamed, Kodesh LaHashem. Kodesh Lamed was lower. Taisa brings down 2 pshatim over here. Doesn't mean that it was actually Yud K Vav K on line 1 and under it, but directly beneath it would be Kodesh Lamed. That's a little strange because you can't read it that way. You would read it Hashem Kodesh La. That's not their Kriya. So Taisa says probably means that it was on the beginning of the bottom line and the end of the top line. So you read it and then you went up a little bit. It is interesting that one word La Hashem was divided. That's what it says, that it was divided either on top and on bottom, or as Taisa says, the line went up. So at the beginning of the line said Kodesh La, and then Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, was higher up. On that point, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi argues, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, I need Visa Veromi because of Allah of Kodesh Hashem B'Shitachas. He said he saw himself, and it was written on 1 line. That's the story we had also in Yuma. Over there spoke about that he saw the Parochas, and there's drops of blood that were on it. And over there also there Rabbanan argued. But here Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, he says he saw the tzitz, and it was written on 1 line. So how come the Rabbanan don't accept his testimony? I'm not sure. But the Maisa seems to be a machlokes. But back to what we want from this Bryce is that it was 2 etzbos. So if you want to know the size of the kapara, it's learning it out from the smallest of the kalim. So why do you learn it out from the misgeres, which was a tefach? Learn out from the tzitz, which is only 2 etzbos. It's even smaller. The more answers, done in kli mikli, vein done in kli mitachshit. The tzitz is not a kli. The tzitz is an ornament. It's one of his clothing. So that's not the same thing. We learn from the smallest kli, not from the smallest beged. The Gemara says, with me there. Okay, I'll find you a kli which also is smaller. The zer. The zer means like a crown. There was some kind of an ornament on 3 of the kelim. We have that in Maseches Yom also. It says on the Aron, on the Shulchan, and on the Mizbeach, there was a crown. The word zer is a crown, and there's some kind of a protrusion around the Aron. We have that at the Gemara over there, and it says the dimensions of the outer box of the Aron, the golden box might have come up to the side, on the side. That was the zer. Anyway, it was not a tefach. It was a mashu. Damamar zer mashu. It was only any minimum amount. That was a rim around these 3 kelim. So how come you're saying that the smallest kli is a tefach? No, the smallest kli is a mashu. The Gemara says, "Done clean the kli, then done clean extra kli." We have to find the kli. The masgeres is called the kli. The rim around the shulchan is called the kli. But these things is only called the hextra kli. It's like some kind of an ornament. It's an ornament on the kli, but it's not the kli itself. So therefore, the smallest kli is the masgeres, is the rim around the shulchan, and that's not called the hextra kli. That's called the kli itself. The Gemara says, not so spashit. Yachim misgeres nami hextra klihu. The Gemara thinks, no, the Mizger, this rim also should be considered an ornament. It's above the Shulchan. The same way we said that the Zer is a crown, something which is a rim, this also is a rim. It's a tefach big, but it's also a rim. And the Gemara now is going to bring a machlokes where the Mizgeres was on the Shulchan. Some say that it was on top of the Shulchan, means you had a table, you had legs under the table, 4 legs under the table, then you had the board, which is the table, and then on top of that, you had a Mizgeres, which was a rim that was a tefach high. But the other choice, the Gemara is going to say that it was different. The Gemara says, the Gemara thought that the Mizgeres, the rim, was on top of the table. That's considered extra kli. It's only ornamental or something which is considered an accessory. But the Gemara says, no, the Mizgeres was under. What does it mean? Under the table. Rashi says that you have the 4 legs, and the legs were attached to each other with this Mizgeres. The Mizgeres, we have also on our tables, also you have such things sometimes, that the legs are connected to each other with a rim. And then on top of that, you put the table. So then it's not considered only a hextra kli. That's considered part of the kli itself. So the Gemara answers that if the Mizgeres was under the table, then it's considered part of the kli, and it's the smallest part that we find that the Torah says the dimensions, that it was a tefach, and therefore we can learn out from there that the smallest kli is a tefach, and the kaporis is going to be learned from there. But the Gemara says not so simple. It's a very nice answer, but that's a machlokes. That would fit well if you hold that the Mizgeres was under the table. then you're right that it's part of the kli. I said, but according to the sheet that it holds that the mizgeres was stuck on top of the table, then it will only considered an accessory, an ornament. I actually kli, it's only a accessory to the kli. And if you're going to learn out from that, then learn out from the zer, which is even smaller. The zer and the mizgeres, both of them have the same function, that it's only a hechsher. And if you learn out from the mizgeres, learn out from the zer, which is even a mashu. So the answer is Ella done and Dava should edit it a little bit, not because it's a small sleep, but done and Dava shenasna b'Torah mida, Dava shenasna b'Torah mida, v'alichichut says from there, it says v'zer shalonasna ben Torah mida klal. You have to find something which is similar, that it has some mention of a dimension that sits in the zer. We answered this. It's already that it's a tachshit. Without Gemara saying, we can say new answer. The Torah doesn't mention any dimensions at all. It's like Allah Moshe Messina. This is Torah Shabbat Pes, the oral law that says that it's supposed to be two etzbos, but it's not in the Torah at all. It doesn't say anything in the Torah how big the tzit should be. And also by the zer, it doesn't say, just to make a zer. We'll figure out that it's a mashu. It doesn't say so, it's a mashu, but the Torah doesn't say any kind of dimension. Mashen came by the Mizgeres, it does say it's a tefach. It says some dimension, and also by the Kaporis, it also says dimensions. What does it say? It says that the length and the width should be 2.5 amos by 1.5 amos. So the way we now updated the drasha is going to be that it should be the smallest kli that has some dimension. So when we want to know what the kaporos is a kli which has a dimension. What's the smallest kli that the Torah mentions that has a dimension? So that is the kaporos. So therefore, that's the source to say the kaporos should be a tefach, because we learned it out from the smallest kli which has a dimension, and that is the kaporos. So at this point, we're happy. The question was, just to back up, the question was, how do you know how big the kaporos is? The Aron is 9 because it's 1.5 amos tall. That's 9 tefachim high. But how do you know the kaporos? And after the drasha, we come out that it's the smallest of the kalim that the Torah mentions and says a dimension for it, and that sits in the zer wouldn't be available to learn from, because there the Torah says no dimension, even though it's Torah Shabbat Peh, but it's not in the Torah Shabbat Peh. The Gemara says now, the bottom line, another answer, how do you know that the kaporos is a tefach? A different source to know that the kaporos was a tefach. Again, the kaporos is the cover over the aron. It says al pnei kaporos kedma. Some say el pnei kaporos, al pnei kedma. Over there, it's talking about sprinkling the blood opposite the kaporos on Yom Kippur, and it says you should sprinkle it al pnei kaporos kedma. So the kaporos calls pnei kaporos, to the face of the kaporos. The word face has some implication that there's a certain size. You never find the word panim, a face, never than a tefach, less than a tefach. A human face. The Gemara is going to say now that a human face, what does a face mean? A human face, the Gemara is assuming. So there's no human face that is smaller than the tefach. So when it says pnei kaporos, it must be that it has at least a tefach. What does it mean, a human face? That a baby that's born, the smallest face is going to be the size of a tefach. You're not going to have any face which is less than the size of a tefach. But the Gemara still says, who says a human face? There are other faces in the world also. There are big things. There are small things. The Bar Yochni. We had Bar Yochni in Yuma already. Over there spoke about the size of an egg. Over there said there's a huge egg, the egg of this bird called Bar Yochni. He talking about his face. His face also has a huge face, this big bird. So whatever it is, this huge thing has a very big face. So maybe the kaporos is supposed to be the size of this big face. So the Gemara says what we said before already. Tafasta rubel or tafasta more tafasta. Whenever you have a question of big or small, you're only eligible to take the smaller one. So we have to find the smallest face. The smallest face is a human face. The Gemara says no, there are faces that are smaller than a human face. Maybe the face of a sparrow, a small bird that is much more smaller than a tefach. Maybe that's how big the kaporos has to be. So the Gemara says, it doesn't just mean what's called the face in our language. It has to be a pasuk. There's a Gezer Shava happening. Here it says Pnei Kaporos. They have to find another place in the Torah where it's called Pnei, the face. And Pnei Tzipor, it doesn't say such a thing. Pnei Tzipor, no such thing. You have to find the place where the Torah says Pnei. Pnei Kaporos. And by people, you find the word Pnei. Over there it says by Yitzchak, it says Pnei, and therefore a human face. It's true that Yitzchak's face was bigger than Tefach, but a human face, and you find the word, you find that a human face is called Pnei. So that's why we learn that the kaporos from a human face, because Gezer Shava Pnei Pnei. The Gemara Sakasha, they have bigger faces. Again, the Gemara keeps on going, always bigger than smaller. Over there it's talking about that Yaakov said to Esav that seeing you is Kiros Pnei Elokim Batitzeni. Maybe the Gemara is taken to mean the face of a malach or the face of God, whatever that means, but not literal, of course. But you see that it's a big face. The Gemara says again, same teres over and over again, tefasta mubal tefasta, tefasta mubal tefasta, you're only eligible to take the smallest thing. If there's big and small, you're only eligible to take the smaller one. Okay, they're smaller. The nail if kruv. The Gemara thinks that a kruv is smaller than a face, than a human face. The Gemara thinks so. And if that's so, so then learn out that a face is even called smaller than a tefach. And you have to, in the pasuk, Gzera Shava, to learn out Pnei. You have here Pnei Akuvim. So you see a kruv is called a face also. And if a kruv is smaller than a tefach, so here we have it. That is a Pnei, which is less, and say that the kapor should be less than a tefach. You're right. You could learn from kruv if you want to. Ravuna could learn from Pnei also, either from a face of a human face or a kruv face, because they're all the same. Both the kruvim and humans, the face is not less than a tefach. And even though you thought that a kruvim could be smaller, no, kruvim also, the smallest face of a kruvim is also a tefach. So the Gemara is happy at this point. The Gemara two terutzim to know how do you know the kaparis is a tefach. The first teres was to learn it out from the smallest kli in the Mishkan, which has some dimension, which was the Mizgeres of the Shulchan. And or you could say because it's the minimum kli, if you hold that it was a Mizgeres Lamata. And the second teres is learn Gzera Shava from Pnei. Where do you see what Pnei is? Either from Pnei Adam, Pnei Yitzchak, or you have Pnei Akuvim, and the minimum size of a Pnei Kruvim or Pnei Adam would be a tefach. And that's why the Kaporis also is a tefach. The Gemara comes in as just a side point to say, let's mention Kruvim, what is a Kruv? Well, my Kruv, Amra Babo Kiravia. So this is a drasha going in Aramaic. It's mixing the Hebrew with Aramaic and saying that the kuf is a prefix. It's not part of the word. Kiruv, Kiravia. The word Ravia came to Bavel, currently Inuka Ravia. Child in Aramaic is called Ravia. So Kiruv means like a child, which would mean that it had a face of a child. The Kruvim were like children. It says in Yecheskel that by the Chayes HaKodesh, it says that it had four faces. It says one face was Pnei Kruv, one face was a Pnei Adam. But now you're saying that a Kruv and a Pnei Adam is the same thing. You're saying that a Kruv is like a child. A child's a human. So there's no difference between the Kruv and the Pnei Adam. It says there was one Pnei Shor, Pnei Aryeh, Pnei Nesher. So it says here, Pnei Adam, Pnei Kruv, they're both the same. Hainu Kruv, Hainu Adam, it's all the same. The answer is, a big face and a small face. Either it means adult face and a child face, or it means that one was bigger than a tefach, one was bigger or smaller, but they're both of them were the size of a tefach, and both of them are human faces, but one was bigger than the other. That's the end of the
Rebbe.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Rav Michal brings a Meir Dikamakom here from the Zohar. Bereshis Yud Ches Beis, Pnei Tinok, Pnei Api Ravravi, Api Zutri means Pnei Tinok, Hainu Bli Zakan, Pnei Adam, Hainu Im Zakan.
Yashikon, an adult face and a child face. Yashikon. Okay, so the more is happy at this point. Just
that an adult face is an adult has a beard. That's what he's saying.
Yeah. Okay. Yashikon. So what we have so far? So just to sum it up so far, the question was, how do you know that the schach has to be 10 tefachim high, which also includes that the walls have to be 10 tefachim high? And the Gemara said because the Shechina came down on the kaporos, and the kaporos was 10 tefachim off the ground because the Aron was 9 and the kaporos was 1. And it says that the Shechina never came down to Oretz. It must be that the Oretz doesn't, once it's 10 tefachim, it's not called Oretz, unless that is called Oretz, and you have to divide the whole Oretz. That's called the Mechitza, and the Schach has to be on the Oretz. But not and everything else after that was to prove that. Either they asked Kashas about the Shechina coming down, Moshe and Eliyahu going up, and then how big is the kaporos? That was challenging or supporting those statements. But that was the raya. That was the whole raya. How do you know that the schach has to be then tefachim high? And now the Gemara is challenging the whole proof now. Top line. It's not true what you said, because according to what you said, the kaporos was including the 10 tefachim. And the schach here, it's true that the oretz goes until 10 tefachim. But who says that the schach has to be above that? The walls, it could be that the Gemara means to say that the walls have to be 10 tefachim high is true, because you have to divide the whole shetach, which is called oretz. So if you want to know the mechitza here, by Sukkah, by Hilchos Shabbos, has to be 10 tefachim would be a good proof. But how do you know that the schach has to be above the 10 tefachim? Maybe the schach could be including the 10 tefachim. We know that the halal, the space under the schach has to be 10 tefachim. If you have a thick schach, and the top of it comes to 10 tefachim, but the bottom is within 10 tefachim, is not good. We had more yesterday that even if you have the chutzin going into 10 tefachim also is not good. The halal, the space under the schach has to be 10 tefachim. And according to the Rosh Hashanah, you don't know that. Who says that the halal is 10 tefachim besides the schach, maybe including the schach? Because you got the whole oretz, like we said, you made the oretz itself was like that. And how do you see that even if the atmosphere of the oretz goes until 10 tefachim, who says that the schach has to be hovering above the oretz? Maybe it can be included also. So the Gemara is going to say a whole new drasha now. So it didn't work. The first drasha didn't work. It might have worked. We spent a lot of time on it, but it doesn't work. It might have worked to tell us that the mechitza has to be 10 tefachim high, and that's Russia might stand. And as far as Hilchos Shabbos goes, that a mechitza to divide with Shisa Yachid is 10 tefachim high. We need a mechitza 10 tefachim. That's good. But to know that the schach has to be above 10 tefachim, that we don't know yet. So the Gemara says a new drasha now. Elam b'beis Olam Kamar. We're going to learn it out from the Beis Hamikdash. What does it say? Ichsid v'abayis hashavon ha'melech Shlomo Hashem shishim amor orko v'esrim bo. So it says the dimensions of the Beis Hamikdash that Shlomo Melech made were 60 amos long, 20 amos wide, and 30 amos tall. What we want is the 30 amos tall. The Beis Hamikdash was 30 amos tall. Shlomo Melech, besides the Aron that he brought in, the Aron that Shlomo Melech had was the same Aron. It was the same Aron that went in the Midbar, the Mishkan, Shiloh, then it went over Givon, and then he was Shiloh, over Givon, Yerushalayim. And then the Beis Hamikdash, it was the same Aron, Kruvim, Kaparos, everything. The original one that Moshe Rabbeinu made, B'Tzalel, that's the one that was brought to the Beis Hamikdash. But besides that, Shlomo Melech also made two big statues called Kruvim. And it says they were 10 amos high. 10 amos is huge. 10 amos is 5 meters high. They were very big besides the Aron and the Kruvim that were on the Aron. There was also another two statues maybe the word statue is not a good word to use, but the images, busts, whatever you want to call it, it was made out of Asay Shoman. The pasuk says it was made out of wood and it was covered with gold. And there were two kruvim. It says over there that they were 10 amos high and had a wingspan. Each one was 10 amos, and they hovering. Their wings were over the Aron with the kruvim. So those statues, those two images, were 10 amos high. How big was the whole Beis Hamikdash? 30 amos high. How big were these two kruvim? 10 amos. That's a third. The Tanya, Mama Sina, Beis Olam, and Kruvim, Mishlish Abayis in Omdim. Mishkanami, Kruvim, Mishlish Abayis. Mishlish Abayis in Omdim. We learned in the Brisa, just like in the Beis Hamikdash, the Kruvim were the height, a third of the height of the building. So to the Mishkan, the Kruvim, which were no special Kruvim, they were Kruvim on top of the Aron, not the other Kruvim. The Kruvim that were on top of the Aron were also reached the height of a third of the building. How big was the Mishkan? Mishkan Kamahavi, how tall was the Mishkan? As big as the Krushim. The Krushim were the beams that were the walls of the Mishkan. So if we know the height of the beams, that's how big that building was. Esra Amos, Mishkan Kamahavi, Esra Amos, how big was the Mishkan? 10 Amos tall. Esra Amos to Orech HaKeresh. The Keresh, the Krushim were 10 Amos tall, standing up tall, upright. So that was 10 Amos. Kamahavi Lahu, how much is 10 Amos in Tvachim? If you translate Amos into Tvachim, Shitin Pushchi, 60 Tvachim. But Pushchi seems to be a Tefach. So each Amma we said is 6 Tvachim. So 10 Amos is 60 Tvachim. How much is a third of that? Tilsi Kamahavi, how much is a third of that? Esra Pushchi, 20 Tvachim. So what was the height of the Kruvim? To what height did the Kruvim reach in the Mishkan? It came to a height of 20 Tvachim. The head of the Kruvim reached 20 Tvachim from the ground. Again, it says that the Kruvim in the Beis Hamikdash were 10 amos high, which is a third of the whole building, which is 30 amos. So too, the Kruvim in the Mishkan are going to reach to a third of the height of the Mishkan. The Mishkan was 60 Tvachim high. So the Kruvim came to the height of 20 Tvachim. But they didn't stand on the floor. They stood on the Aron, right? On the Kaporos. It's good. It's good. The Cheshbon is good.
The two Kruvim in...
Two Kruvim on the Aron. They stood on the Aron, on the Kaporos. So if we're going to be able to figure out how much was the Aron and the Kaporos, we know how much was the space between the wings and the top of the Kaporos, and we'll know what's called schach, because it says that the wings of the Kruvim were sochachim. They were schach. They were sheltering. So the word schach we're going to find means 10 tvachim. The cheshbon is going to be if we know the where the wings of the Kruvim were, and we know the height of the Kaporos, that's going to be 20 minus. So the 20 tvachim, which was the height of the Kruvim, take away the Aron and the Kaporos, which was 10, you have 10 left. And that's called between the wings of the Kruvim to the top of the Kaporos, which they were standing on, that's called, it was Sochachim ala Kaporos. And that means it was 10 tvachim. And you see that the wings were above that. That's the Gemara's answer.
Since when were those two Kruvim so big? They were small Kruvim. They were sitting. Not in the Beit HaMikdash, right?
No, we're talking about the Mishkan now. We're talking
20,
about,
there were 20 almost high. The two kruvim. 10
No.
kruvim.
and I'm not sure what you're saying.
I
The,
thought you said the kruvim were 10.
the Kruvim in the Mishkan, besides the ones of the Aron, there were two statues that were 10 amos high. In the Mishkan, you didn't have that. The Mishkan, you had the regular Kruvim that were on top of the Mishkan. How big were they? They reached to the height of 20 tefachim, not 20 amos, 20 tefachim. They reached to a height of 20 tefachim. We said we translated the Mishkan into tefachim, 10 amos high, crushing with 10 amos, to translate that into tefachim, 60 tefachim high. And the height of the Kruvim was a third of that. It could reach to a height of 20 tefachim. But they were standing on top of the kapor. They were standing on top. They were standing on top of the kaporas, which the Aron the kaporas is 10 tefachim. So from the top of the Kruvim until the kaporas was 10 tefachim. That's the Gemara. Let's see the Gemara inside. Mishkan Kamihavi Esr Amos. What was the height of the Mishkan? 10 Amos. How do you know? Because the question with 10 Amos. They said that's Amos or Chakorish. The question with 10 Amos long. How much is that translated into Tefachim? Shit and Pushli, 60 Tefachim. How much is a third of that? Tilsa Kamihavi Esr Pushli. The third, which would be the height of the Kruvim, they came to a height of 20 Tefachim. But they were standing on top of the Aron. Dala started the Aron the Kaporas. Subtract the 10 tefachim of the Aron and the Kaporas. So how much is from the height of the Kruvim until their feet? Pashadu Asara. 10 tefachim left. Not the 10 tefachim of the Aron and the Kaporas. 10 tefachim from the height of the Kruvim until their feet. The pasuk says that the Kruvim had their wings spread above, sheltering with their wings over the Kaporas. That's there you have it. So the pasuk calls it a schach when it's higher than 10 tefachim, because the Kruvim themselves were 10 tefachim high, and their wings were above that. So you see that's called, and it's called schach, sofachim. So you see that schach is 10 tefachim. The Gemara asks the same kasha over again. Who says that it's above the 10 tefachim? Maybe it's including the 10 tefachim. The word gatfinu means wings. Their wings. Who says that the wings were above their heads? Maybe the wings were spread equal, the same height, level to their heads. And again, the 10 tefachim, it's true, you have 10 tefachim, but who says that the sochachim is above the 10 tefachim? Same way we said before. Maybe the schach is included, just like over there. We said by the kaporas that it didn't prove, it wasn't enough proof to say that it's the Shekhinah came down, but the kaporas was still, maybe the schach is including the 10 tefachim. Who says that the schach is above the 10 tefachim? Here too. Who says that the schach of the wings of the kaporas of the Kruvim were above the 10 tefachim? Maybe they held their wings level to their heads, not above their heads, and their heads were 10 tefachim high from their feet, and so too the wings were level to their heads, and you only have 10 tefachim including the wings. Who says that it's called schach? If so, it comes out that schach is less than 10 tefachim. It says, what does it say in the pasuk? Just to get the pasuk back a couple of lines ago. This word lamala means they were high up, so it wasn't level to the heads. It was high as lamala. Lamala said. So Moshe says, okay, maybe it's very high. Maybe the middle tuba, maybe it's very high. They had their wings very high above their heads, and then it's going to be that schach is only called more than 10 tefachim. The Moshe says, "Miksev lamala lamala." It doesn't say lamala lamala. It says lamala, which means directly above. So the kruvim were 10 tefachim high, and the wings were directly above that. So now you see that schach is called over 10 tefachim. So the Gemara is happy. We now prove that the schach is above 10 tefachim. The Gemara says all this is we started off today that Aron Tisha B'Kaporos Tefach. That's not so simple. The whole thing that we said in the beginning as a given that the Aron is 9 tefachim high. That's not simple. But Meir says that all the Amos, and Rashi says it means, the Gemara is going to say soon, there's binyan and kalim. Sometimes we talk about the structure, sometimes we talk about kalim. So Meir says always there's 6 tefachim Amos. Benonios. Rashi says why it's called Benonios, average, not too big, not too small. It was 6 tefachim Amos. So then it's true, the Aron that it says was an am and a half tall, that's am and a half is going to be 9 tefachim because 6 and 3 is going to be 9. But it's not so simple. Rabbi Yehuda says that it's not like that. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that when you talk about the structure, it says Amos over there, each Amos 6 tefachim. But if you talk about kalim, vessels, so then when it says an Amos, it's 5 tefachim Amos. So then how big was the Aron? It was Amos and a half, so it would be 7.5 tefachim. Because Amos 5 tefachim, half Amos 2.5, so altogether 7.5 tefachim. Michael Neymar. The whole Aron with the kaparos would only be 8.5 because the Aron is 7.5 tall and the kaparos is a tefach on top of that. So altogether it's 8.5. And the same cheshbon still holds true that the Kerubim,
11 and a half.
what 7.5? The
There's
Aron is
20.
Yeah,
No,
20.
the top will be,
Right,
no, the Kruvim will be 11 and a half.
right, very good.
Right.
That if the Kruvim reached to
20 minus
a
8
third
minus.
of the height of the Mishkan, which was, again, that didn't change, that the Mishkan was 60 Tvachim high, and the Kruvim reached to a third of that, which is 20 Tvachim high. So from the top of the Kaparas until 20 Tvachim was 11 and a half, because it's 20 minus 8 and a half. So you have 11 and a half. So you're going to say that Schach is only when it's 11 and a half Tvachim. That was against the Mishnah. We say that the Sukkah doesn't have to be 10 Tvachim. That's the most kasha. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the cheshbon should come out that a Schach has to be 11 and a half. Oren v'kaparas kam evelu, twan yopalga. The Oren together with the kaparas will be 8 and a half. Pashalu chatzar v'yopalga. It's left over 11 and a half, and that means that the Kruvim were 11 and a half, and their wings were above that. Ema sukkah ad havya chatzar v'yopalga. According to that, say maybe that Schach has to be 11 and a half tefachim off the ground.
But
So-
Rabbi, you can also say that even though 10 is the cutoff point, but they were 11 and a half, and they were sochech. It doesn't
No,
mean that that's the halachic breakdown.
Yes,
of-
but back to the
of
kasha, prove it. The question was, how do you know that it's
Schach.
called Schach?
That's the place to learn it from. Maybe
No,
it's just-
no, you didn't prove anything. We're looking for a proof. How do you know that it's called Schach over 10 tefachim? So you bring me a pasuk where it was 11 and a half. Show me where it's 10, where it's 10.
Oh, you want to say that maybe if it's a drop over 10, it might not be a schach anymore?
Right. That's the whole question. That was the whole question.
It's not.
Again, that was the whole question. How do you know that a Schach has to be 10 tefachim? Maybe it can be less. Maybe it has to be more. How do you know? So he brought us, so till now we brought us raya that it's, you find that the Schach is, the wings of the Kruvim is 10 tefachim, over 10 tefachim. So you see Schach is called over 10 tefachim. So you have to do that.
That's how we
But if you
learn
find,
it.
only,
We
if
learned
only
it
saw,
that
you only found the source from 11 and a half, so you don't see that a source that is called a Schach over 10 tefachim. So maybe the sukkah has to be 11 and a half tefachim high.
Oh,
It's
we
true.
haven't- We haven't found a 10, we haven't found yet 10.
Right, that's what we're looking for. We just found one proof so far, and it's only according to Rameir. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's not good. The answer is, Rabbi Yehuda, you're right. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, it has to be Lamach Moshe Messinai. There's no source in the pasuk. There's no drasha to learn it out. It has to be just completely oral law that the sukkah is 10 tefachim. And like you're saying, like Chaim David said now, that schach could be 10 tefachim. But the Torah says that the Kruvim have to be 11 and a half. It's not a kasha. It could be that the Kruvim were 11 and a half, but you have that. But there was Lamach Moshe Messinai. That schach, the word schach that they find by a sukkah is 10 tefachim is enough. But it happens to be that the Kruvim had to be 11 and a half because the Aron was only 8 and a half. That's good. That doesn't change. How do you know? The Amar, Rabbi Chia Barashi, Amar Rav, Shiur, and Chatzitzin, and Malchitz, and Allah Moshe Messinai. These three things are Allah Moshe Messinai. We're going to go into the sugi tomorrow. That's already, maybe we could have done more today, but I didn't prepare further. So we'll leave it over here. Shiur, and Chatzitzin, and Malchitzin. Shiur means, we have this Gemara in Yuma also. Shiurim, like Kezesim, Koseves, whatever there's a Shiur. And Chatzitzin, that's about Chatzitza by mikveh. There shouldn't be a separation between the body and the water, and machitza, that's what we're talking about over here, and machitza 10 tefachim, the schach has to be 10 tefachim off the ground. All these things are Allah Moshe Messinai. That's then the Gemara. We stop over here. The Gemara is going to continue tomorrow to ask questions on all these. But for today, that's where we stop. Just to sum up the whole Gemara. The one question we had today: how do you know that the schach is 10 tefachim off the ground? How do you know that the machitza is 10 tefachim? Maybe also including the question and the answer. The Gemara had 2 points. The first point might still remain maskana as far as the machitza is 10 tefachim high, but not for the schach. The Gemara brings that the Aron, the kaporos is 10 tefachim, and the shechina came down on top of the kaporos, and the shechina never came down to the oretz. So you see that the oretz is 10 tefachim. So the machitza has to divide the whole oretz, and the Gemara thought also that the schach has to be hovering over that. But that the Gemara, even after the Gemara had all the kashas in between, and answered all the kashas, but who says that the schach has to be hovering over? Maybe if it's even included in the 10 tefachim would be good enough. So for that, the Gemara said the answer is going to be from the height of the wings of the Kruvim. The Gemara proves that the height of the Kruvim was a third of the Mishkan, which was 60 tefachim. You learn that out from the proportion, the ratio between the Kruvim and the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash. It's a third of the house, 10 amos and 30 amos. It's going to be 20 tefachim and 60 tefachim. That the whole Mishkan was 60 tefachim high. So the Mishkan of Kruvim came to a height of 20 tefachim, and it says that their wings hovered over the Kruvim, right above the Kruvim. The wings were right above their head. So that's once we know that if we know that the Aron and the Kaporos was 10 tefachim, so that makes the height of the Kruvim themselves was another 10 tefachim, and the Kruvim were sochachim ala Kaporos. So you see the schach is called 10 tefachim. But if he doesn't hold that, he holds that the Aron was 7.5 tall, with the Kaporos was 8.5, and the Kruvim themselves were going to be 11.5. That wouldn't be a good source. If anything, the source would be that the Kruvim have to be that the schach is 11.5. So yes, Allah Moshe Messinai. In between, we got some information about the Shekhinah coming down above 10 Tfachim, the Moshe and Eliyahu going up within, that didn't go within 10 Tfachim of the Shemayim, and what else we have about that Kaporis Tefach, we learned out the Maskana, we learned out one of two choices, either from the smallest Kli, which has dimensions, either if you hold that we found the Machlokas also if the Mizgeres is on top of the Shulchan and bottom of the Shulchan. If it's on bottom of the Shulchan, then it's called a Kli, and that's the smallest Kli. If it's on top, then it's called the Tachet Kli, and then you can learn that from the Zer also. And that the Gemara says the smallest Kli, which has a dimension, which is the Mizgeres of the Shulchan. That's one way.
Even a Tachshit is called a Kli?
No, that Gemara says no. So it's only called the Tachet Kli. Hechsher Kli, the Gemara says, according to Waman the Yamar, that it's also called, you also can learn out from it. The Mizgeres is also Hechsher Kli if it was on top of the Shulchan, that it was an extra Kli. You could learn out from there, but it has to be a Kli which the Torah gave a measurement for, and not like the Zer, which the Torah gave no measurement for. And the second terrace, the Gemara learned how you know that a Kaporis is a Tefach because it says Pnei Kaporis, and the Gzer Shava to another place where it's called Pnei, either Pnei Yitzchak or Pnei Yakuvim. That all those things are called a Tefach. The minimum size is a Tefach, and Agav Kuvim means it has the face of a Tinok, and the difference between Pnei Adam, Pnei Kuv, one was a adult face and one was a child's face.
But you only say a child's face would be a tefach, and an adult would be
Right.
a big
Right. But the word play is not even on the child's face also. Okay, Yashkoach, everybody. We'll be back in about 10 minutes, 30 minutes to continue with Navi today. Yashkoach, everybody. Thank you. Yashkoach, thank you.